Yes, everybody. Welcome back to Threadman Chaza. Welcome back to YouTube. I hope you're all well. Um, we're back with a video today. As you probably know, you can see on my screen right now, Twitter is going a bit crazy. Um, Recent news that sort of people have got limits now on how many tweets they can view per day. You know, if you're a verified account, you can view more. If you're unverified, you can't view many at all. Very, very small number of tweets that people can view. So I'm going to try and sort of improve my content on other pages on here and on TikTok as well. So please do go and follow me on TikTok at Threadman Chaza. Please do subscribe to me on here, Threadman Chaza as well. I've realized that, you know, I cannot be over reliant on Twitter. There's been a few sort of moments in the last few months that have made me think about Twitter. And even if I'm only uploading a couple of times, you know, 3 or 4 times, maybe sort of 3 or 4 times, maybe in sort of a month on here, it's better than nothing, right? So I know that I can't be, I'm not going to release loads and loads of videos per week on YouTube, but even if it's only a few per month, I think you guys would like that, and I would like that, and I think I need to make sure that I'm not too reliant on Twitter. Because I'm not sure how the future of Twitter is going to look. This might only be a temporary thing, but yes, guys. So please do subscribe on here. Please do follow me on TikTok. The link's in the description. It's just Threadman Chazza again, as on all social media. But yeah, let's get into what we're gonna discuss today. So Mason Mount. So in recent days, Manchester United agreed a deal with Mason Mount. I released a thread on Twitter, which was posted before we'd reached an agreement. So obviously we had this bid situation where Man United made 3 different bids that were rejected by Chelsea. But eventually Manchester United agreed a deal with Chelsea, £55 million plus 5 million add-ons. I think I expected probably it to be a little bit more because of the fact that Chelsea wanted, I think, 70, 80 million at the start. I still think it's a lot of money for somebody who's got 1 year left on their contract. But still, ERIK ten Hag wanted Mason Mount, and we're going to try and sort of break down why that is on this stream. So yes, guys, that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's just start about Mason Mount's career. So as you probably know from the Chelsea Academy, on loan to Vitesse in 2017 to 18, that's where ERIK ten Hag sort of got a look at Mason Mount and really liked what Mason Mount did there. Scored several goals, got several assists that season. He was also named in the Eredivisie Team of the Season, and he won the Player of the Season for Vitesse that season, right? So I can't include every single detail about Mount on threads. You guys know there's character limits. I'm going to try and add a few extra details than what's written here, but he did get in the Team of the Season as well for the league, so that was really good. Then had another loan spell at Derby, got to the playoff final, obviously lost to Aston Villa in that playoff final, but had a really good season there with Frank Lampard. Then returned to Chelsea under Frank Lampard in 1920. And then obviously Chelsea had that season where Lampard was in charge. The following season for about half the season, and then Thomas Tuchel came in, and obviously they won the Champions League. So that's sort of Mason Mount's career trajectory. So why do managers like Mason Mount? Well, Mount obviously was a big player for Lampard and for Tuchel. Tuchel talks about his personality being amazing, competitive guy, leaves his heart on the pitch. Obviously, work rate, personality seems to be very good. But it's not just that. He's not just a. There's this sort of term that gets sort of thrown around, passion merchant, you know, blah blah. But Mason Mount's got quality to match, right? So he won Player of the Season twice under Tuchel, and yeah, got a decent goals and assists sort of return. All right, so for Chelsea, he was their key creative player. In the season where they won the Champions League, he made the most key passes and created the most big chances for Chelsea. And he's the only Chelsea player since the start of sort of when he started off playing in the first team. He's the only Chelsea player to score sort of 20 plus goals and get 20 plus assists. So it's clear that Mason Mount has been a key player for Chelsea over the years, despite him not having a good season last season. there's certainly something to be excited about from a Manchester United point of view, right? So where does he play? So for Lampard, he played more of an 8 or a 10 in sort of a 4-2-3-1. For Tuchel, he played more as one of the number 10s in a 3-4-2-1. So Mason Mount has been used to, throughout his career, he has got used to playing in different systems, different formations, right? So that is definitely a big positive of Mason Mount. He's also played some games out wide. He's also played some games sort of in a pivot, so much deeper. So Mason Mount has got a lot of tactical sort of flexibility. So ERIK ten Hag will be a huge fan of that, right? We know ERIK ten Hag has used, for example, Bruno Fernandes in a wide area. He's used Luke Shaw as a centre back. He's used Victor Lindelof in midfield a couple of times. He's used Diogo Dalot at left back and right back, right? So we know he's used obviously Wout Weghorst in midfield. So we know that ERIK ten Hag likes flexibility and versatility. So this is what Mason Mount can offer. All right. So I'm not going to play the videos, obviously, because I don't want to get copyrighted and stuff like that. But ball striking is one of Mount's best attributes, right? So you'll see, if you look at Mason Mount's goals from Chelsea, a decent proportion of his goals, come from sort of the edge of the box, clean strike of the ball. Generally keeps his shots nice and low, driven, hard shots. He's got really good technique. So against low blocks, we improved last season. 100% we improved in terms of breaking down low blocks. I think I'd like to go back and look at the stats, but generally against the teams in the bottom half of the table, we were brilliant last season. Right? If you think at home, obviously in the league at home, I think we drew to Southampton. We had a red card, Casemiro, that game. Obviously, we lost at home to Brighton in the first game of the season. And there was another couple of, I think we drew at home to Leeds as well. And there might have been another one that was drawn. But generally, against those teams in the bottom half of the table, away from home as well, you know, we beat Leicester away from home. We beat Southampton away from home. We beat Bournemouth away from home. We beat Leeds away from home. We beat the majority of those teams in the bottom half away from home as well. So we could say this is what Manchester United should be doing, but we know in previous years against lower blocks, against teams that sit in, we really struggled in recent years. You know, we've really struggled when we've played against those teams that have got sort of a real good resolve, a real good fight in them. You know, sitting back and making them hard to break down. We know United have struggled, but Christian Eriksen, bringing him in really has helped us hugely in terms of breaking down low blocks. But Christian Eriksen has not got, although obviously you've seen down the years Eriksen with that sort of a long range shot, he hasn't produced that as much in recent years. He's lost maybe a little bit of that dynamism Eriksen that he had, and that's what Mason Mount will bring. So that's a big attribute of Mount. The next thing is set piece delivery. So for Chelsea, Mason Mount was on set pieces a lot, corners and free kicks. You can see here, this is a table from sort of most assists from dead balls since 1920 season. And this table was correct as of January 2021. So sort of the following season, this table was still correct. So Mason Mount was still amongst the best in the top 5 European leagues for assists from dead balls. Now, obviously, that also involves the players on the end of his corners or the players on the end of his free kicks executing the set piece plan or attacking the ball with real power, etc. And we know at Manchester United, we haven't made the most of these set piece situations. So I know Mason Mount's set piece delivery, you know, if we do bring that to Manchester United, we've also got to have the players on the end of those set pieces converting the chances. So I know that, but bringing Mason Mount in, I think would improve the consistency of our delivery. I think a lot of our set pieces still sort of seem to hit the first man. You get the groans and moans around Old Trafford at times. Last season, I remember a lot of those free kicks just hitting, sort of free kicks and corners hitting the first man. And Mason Mount would sort of make our set piece delivery a lot more consistent. And this is particularly important if we look at this table, because Manchester United last season, Manchester United last season ranked bottom of the Premier League for set piece goals. So in the past, I think we used to focus on set piece goals and scoring goals from set pieces. We talked about it being sort of a thing. This side's battling for relegation. This side's battling for mid-table. This side's, really struggling down the bottom of the table. But they score a lot of goals from set pieces. They rely a lot on set pieces. I think we talked about this before. Teams like Sam Allardyce teams, Sean Dyche teams, we associate these teams with being the teams that have got the biggest men, and they rely most on set pieces. They just look to generate set pieces as much as possible. And that's why they're so important for those teams down the bottom. But I think what we've seen in recent seasons is how important set pieces are for teams going for titles, for teams at the top of the table. Because in recent seasons, the team that have conceded the fewest from set pieces and the teams that have scored the most from set pieces have tend to be generally in that sort of top bracket, the best bracket for both conceding and scoring, tend to be the teams that are sort of the Arsenal, Manchester City teams. So Arsenal, City, Liverpool, maybe you've got Brentford up there as well. But they tend to be the teams that are up there. So if you look at Manchester United down there with 5 goals from set pieces, so 12 behind Liverpool at the top. That is a huge, huge range. And even if Manchester United can increase their set piece goals by 5 next season, even if we can just double it, those 5 goals are likely to generate a few more points. And you have to try and maximize. You have to try and get every little advantage you can in football to try and give you a few more points a season. And Manchester City in recent years have done it. We can talk about Man City. Obviously this season they've slightly changed their system. They play sort of with more traditional centre-backs, so they've got a bit more height in their team. They've got Haaland as well. But even, in previous seasons, Man City have tended to rank well for set pieces, even if they haven't got the most tall profiles, the most tall players in their team. It's not all about height. It's about sort of, you've got to work with your set piece coach, working on routines on the training ground, generating opportunities, generating cutbacks, generating the best chance to provide you with an opportunity. So Manchester United have got work to do on set pieces, and I think Mason Mount can help us do that. Attacking runs. So Mason Mount is really, really good with his movement off the ball in attacking areas. So he likes to make runs in the channels, overlapping, underlapping, a fullback or winger, and then getting a cutback or cross into the box. This is absolutely paramount for us, particularly for ERIK ten Hag. So if you look at this table here, this is via The Athletic. So Manchester United have seen an increase in off-the-ball runs into the box under Ten Hag so far. So you'll see there, you'll see sort of when ERIK ten Hag came in on sort of 0 on the first game week, I'd say it was about just under 30, about 28, 29 off-ball runs into the box. And then if you look at sort of the end of the season, you're looking at above 40, so about 43 runs into the box. So that's a real what's that, sort of a 30, at least a 30% increase, isn't it? Yeah, so about 35% increase, something like that. So that's a big increase in off the ball runs into the box. So ERIK ten Hag really, really values movement in attacking areas, lots of positional rotations, and I think Mason Mount can certainly provide that for us. And as I said, this could be particularly helpful for Jadon Sancho, Anthony as well. I got a little bit of criticism when I said that about Jadon Sancho. I know a lot of people, people are thinking, oh, you're making excuses for Sancho. I'm just looking at how Mason Mount could sort of help other players. And I think Anthony and Sancho would both massively benefit from this, particularly Sancho. I think Jadon Sancho on that left-hand side, if he plays on the left, which is more likely if Rashford's going to be at number 9 for more games, if we don't sign a established striker in the summer, which I hope we do, by the way. But if Sancho is on the left, with Luke Shaw as well there, I think Mason Mount, Shaw and Sancho, I think Sancho would have a lot of movement off the ball, a lot of overlapping, a lot of underlapping, which would really suit him because Sancho is fantastic at picking out those passes. He's absolutely brilliant at noticing where the space is. And if he's got runners around him, he finds that pass really, really well generally. So I think Mount on that left-hand side will be brilliant. But also, as this little graphic suggests here, Mason Mount is comfortable on either flank. So he's comfortable in either channel. So under Frank Lampard, in the 2021 season, he was operating more sort of in the left channel. But under Thomas Tuchel, still quite a bit in the left channel, but more in the right channel. So Mason Mount is quite two-footed. His left foot is quite strong, which gives us a lot of flexibility again. I think at Manchester United, we do. I think we lack two-footed players in a lot of areas, right? I don't think we've got that many players who are really, really good with both feet. And I think especially if you get a player overlapping or underlapping on the left-hand side, you want that player to whip that ball in with their left foot. You don't want them to keep having to cut in and use their right foot. It's a lot easier for defenders to sort of defend against. If you've got a left footer cutting it back, it's much more difficult for defenders, right? And it's the same on the right-hand side. You know, Anthony's received criticism for his over-reliance on his left foot. If we can get Mason Mount in that right channel, overlapping or underlapping Anthony and whipping that ball across with his right foot, brilliant, right? Absolutely brilliant. So Mason Mount comfortable with both feet. His engine as well. So Fred, you'll see, is on this graphic. So Fred is likely to leave Manchester United this summer. Now Mount's come in. But you'll see here, this is from last season, in a season where Mount had a poor season for, you know, all Chelsea had a poor season, of course, but Mount didn't have a good season, but still ranked very, very highly in possession-adjusted pressures. So really, really, really tenacious, really good engine out of possession. And you'll see Fred is up there in that graphic. But if Fred was to be sold, Mason Mount would be no worse than Fred out of possession. I actually think Mason Mount would be better out of possession. I'm going to explain why in a minute. And he's also better in possession. So Mason Mount's a clear upgrade on Fred. So if we did sell Fred, and I know Fred has provided us with some good moments, especially off the bench. He's a very, very good option to have if you want to, if you want somebody to come on and disrupt the opposition, if you want somebody to come on and get closer to a certain midfield player that's causing some trouble from the opposition. If you want someone to disrupt them as much as possible, you know you're going to bring Fred on because he's like a little terrier. He's just everywhere, just trying to disrupt as much as he can. Mason Mount also has that ability. Okay, so if we did sell Fred, I don't think we'd miss him in terms of that aspect. And compared to Christian Eriksen, it's night and day. So Eriksen on the left from last season, Mount on the right from a few seasons ago. The reason why I've used his stats from a few seasons ago here is because his sample size was quite low for sort of last season. So I didn't want the stats to be sort of overinflated. So I've used a season where Mount was involved more, and I've compared his stats to midfielders, and Christian Eriksen's stats are compared to midfielders as well. So it's quite an even it's quite an even comparison because it's more fair, right? So you'll see there's a clear difference here with the majority of the stats, particularly for the tackles, and particularly what's really key, I think, is the tackles in the mid-third and the attacking third, okay? So you'll see on the right, Mason Mount ranking, basically he's making a tackle more or less every game in the middle third of the pitch, and he's making a tackle more or less once every 2 games in the attacking third of the pitch, right? So that is absolutely vital. If you think over a season, if you think one of your attacking players is tackling one of the opposition defenders in the attacking third or one of the opposition's midfielders, imagine what you could generate from that tackle. You know, you could talk about sort of counter-attack, and we know Manchester United are deadly on the counter-attack. This is something that ERIK ten Hag has sort of pursued with. Obviously, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer pursued it. You know, ERIK ten Hag has sort of, we've seen Manchester United, you know, there's been some graphics that have been released by The Athletic again that talk about Manchester United's counter-attacking ability. And that is still there, obviously, with Bruno, with Rashford. I think with Anthony, we've seen it a little bit towards the end of the season as well. And if Mason Mount can provide that counter-pressing ability and make tackles in the attacking third, that's obviously going to give you chances, right? You're going to generate chances. And this is why Jurgen Klopp wanted Mason Mount. So that's the first key comparison. I think the other key comparison really is just sort of the middle section, right? So dribblers tackled, dribblers challenged, percentage of dribblers tackled, challenges lost. Obviously, I expect Eriksen's numbers are a little bit better because he probably makes fewer challenges, right? So Matt Mount's figure is going to be a little bit lower because he makes more challenges, right? So that's why his figure is a little bit lower. But if you see there, Mason Mount is sort of compared to this is all midfield players, by the way. So this is defensive midfield players, central midfield players, right? So remember, we're talking about Mason Mount being quite an attacking midfield player. So this is compared to all midfield players. Mason Mount is ranking sort of generally in the average, yeah, so 49, 52, 50 percentile. So generally he's average amongst all midfielders for sort of tackling dribblers or challenging dribblers coming towards him. And that is a vital asset to have. So Mason Mount defensively is a decent defender. He's decent. Off the ball, his awareness is pretty good. He's tenacious. His pressing is good. So he'd be a huge upgrade on Eriksen in that sort of area. And I've talked about this being vital against the top teams. So against the top teams, this would be absolutely vital. So we saw last season how Manchester United struggled, particularly away from home, against the physicality of some teams. We really, really struggled in that midfield area. And I think a lot of people have talked about the balance of Casemiro, Mount, and Bruno. And it's too attacking. But I actually think out of possession, I actually think it will be a lot stronger than we would be with Eriksen in there, right? So I think it's very, very important to note how this could help in big games where you've got to be physical in midfield, where you've got to get your pressing right, you've got to win challenges in there. And I think we've been a little bit too soft in there. And with Eriksen, I think Bruno is reasonably good in there in terms of his off the ball work, but Eriksen, we've been too soft in there. So that's where I think Mount would help. Leadership. He's been captain under 18 and senior level. Thomas Tuchel's talked about everything. He's got everything to lead the team. I've done a bit of research on Mason Mount. He's not a loud leader. He's not a vocal leader, but it seems like he can lead by example on the pitch. And I think it's important to have leaders that can do that. You look at Manchester City, the way they do things in terms of their captaincy. Obviously, Ilkay Gundogan has left Manchester City now, but on a football pitch, you need one or two vocal players, of course, but you also need 4 or 5 or 6 players that can lead by example, right? That can lead by example. I think Manchester United have lacked that a little bit. You've got to remember Mason Mount's a Champions League winner. He's a Champions League winner, right? He seems, from what I've watched and what you guys have watched as well, you'll probably agree, he seems like a good professional, right? And I think that's why managers like him so much, on top of the ability he has. So what about this point? So in terms of build-up play, how are we going to do it? Right? A lot of people have talked about Casemiro, Mount, and Bruno. Where's the first phase player? Where's the player who can drop into the defensive third and help us progress play? Well, first you've got to ask yourself, does ERIK ten Hag want to do that? Yes, he does, as much as possible, right? He wants to do it as much as possible. He's also quite pragmatic, ERIK ten Hag, so he doesn't mind going against building up from the back if we don't have the profiles. We've seen that this season when we lost to Brentford and Brighton. We obviously abandoned playing out from the back as often. We kicked a lot of balls longer. So ERIK ten Hag is not afraid of mixing it up, but he prefers, if you've got the profiles, he prefers to build up, as he said here. If you do that, the build up right, you can control and dominate. So how did ERIK ten Hag's Ajax build up from the back without Frenkie de Jong? So they obviously, after the 18-19 season, when they lost de Jong, De Ligt, Van der Beek, etc., how did they build up from the back? Well, they obviously used Onana, they used Blint. Across the next few years, they used Blint, Timber, Martinez, Mazraoui. Yeah, so they were the key players for Ajax. So basically, what Erik ten Hag did was, although he didn't have that first phase specialist, so he used Gravenberch, who was probably the most comfortable out of all those midfielders that he used after Frankie de Jong to sort of drop in and carry the ball up the pitch and help his team progress up the pitch. He used sort of Edson Alvarez, who was more of a sort of a destroyer type profile in there. He used Davy Klaassen, who was more of a number 8. He used a lot of other midfielders. I think Kalen Camp was using there. Daley Blind was using there at times. Obviously, that would offer a bit more progressive, a bit more progression. Martinez was using there a couple of times as well. But mostly when Frankie de Jong left, Erik ten Hag used very, very technically gifted centre-backs, a very, very technically gifted right-back, and a brilliant ball-playing goalkeeper to help his team progress at the pitch. Okay? So Erik ten Hag made up for that lack of specialist midfield player who can drop in and progress the ball at the pitch by using brilliant defensive players and a brilliant build-up structure that allowed him to get the best out of those players. And one of those sort of structures was using a diamond, right? So Erik ten Hag liked to create this sort of diamond during sort of in the build-up phase. He liked to, in order to get the best out of those progressive attributes, right? So if we have signed Mason Mount, by the way, by now, obviously this was released on the 26th of June before the news came out, but we have signed Mason Mount. So what do Manchester United need now? We need a new goalkeeper. We need a new right centre-back. Absolutely vital. Okay, so there's been links to Andre Onana. I think Onana or Costa would be a huge upgrade. I'm going to hopefully do some content on the goalkeeper situation soon. There have been some reports that have come out saying FFP, means that Manchester United can't sign Onana, etc., etc. That would be an absolute disaster if we went for a younger keeper. That a couple of them have been mentioned, Feyenoord keeper and another keeper. I haven't seen them, to be honest with you, so I can't really comment. But Manchester United desperately need, if they can get Onana or Diogo Costa, that would be a huge upgrade. We also need a right centre-back. Jean-Claire Todibo from Nice has been a player that's been sort of linked. I've watched a little bit of him. He's a fantastic ball-playing centre-back. Yeah, so in terms of on the ball, he's brilliant. So I think we need a goalkeeper and a right centre-back to firstly make up for the lack of first phase specialist in midfield, and also to take the weight off Martinez and Shaw a little bit, because we rely on them too much for progression. And when they're not in the team, if Martinez and Shaw were to get injured, or if we want to give both of them a rest, because obviously last season when Martinez was out, Shaw came in left centre back. But sometimes you want to rest both of two of your best players, or you want one of them's injured and you want to rest the other one, whatever it might be. We need that right centre back to come in alongside maybe Victor Lindelof. And then you can use Malacia at left back, etc. And we also need that goalkeeper to come in. All right. What about when the ball goes through midfield? So who's going to control the game? Well, none of Casemiro, Mount, or Bruno are dictators in terms of dictating play, controlling the tempo of games. Mount and Bruno somewhat can drop in to deeper areas of the pitch, and under no pressure, they can sort of get on the ball and get the team moving, but they're not what I would call a tempo controller, right? And so they don't control the tempo of games. So how would we get around this? Well, I've just done a little bit of thinking. Maybe Erik ten Hag is looking to control the game more out of possession in terms of a high counter press, right? Pressing intensity. You'll see here again, since Erik ten Hag took over, this graphic shows presses per defensive action. So passes per defensive action, sorry. So a lower PPDA indicates a higher pressing intensity, right? So the higher you are vertically up the graph, the better your pressing intensity is. So you'll see when Erik ten Hag took over, it was about 14. And when we finished the season off, sort of in the peak of the season, it got up. It went to about 10, but when the season finished, it was probably about 12 or 13, right? So it has definitely gone up under Erik ten Hag's reign, right? So this shows that Erik ten Hag is looking to, when he can, sort of introduce a higher pressing intensity. We've seen Manchester United drop into sort of a mid or low block at times of the season against certain teams in certain areas. in certain phases of the game. But we know Erik ten Hag does like to introduce a high press when possible. And will Manchester United, especially with Mount and Bruno, if they were to play as number 8s, Manchester United, I think, would they have a higher pressing intensity? I certainly think so. So although there's no dictator of possession, there's no tempo controller in that midfield, we could use our defensive players more as tempo controllers. We could maybe, and I think we will see this, we'll push a centre-back or a full-back into midfield when possible to try and get on the ball and try and dictate the tempo somewhat. I think Luke Shaw can do it to an extent. Martinez can. Dallow's been used as an inverted full-back at times. So Erik ten Hag, I think, is going to find other ways, as well as using Mount and Bruno at times to drop in and try and get on the ball. They're not just going to be pushed as high 8s all the time in the half spaces. They might also drop deeper and try and get on the ball. I think we're going to use defensive players as well to try and sort of push defensive players into midfield. We've seen Manchester City do it with John Stones from centre-back, or using an inverted full-back, Shaw or Dallow, to try and generate some sort of control there. But also out of possession, I think Erik ten Hag is going to focus a lot on that to try and stop and disrupt opposition teams from building up from the back and then trying to counter and score goals and create chances that way. Last point, Mason Mount's injury record is very, very good. His versatility is good. He's very rarely sort of got like a recurring injury. He got sort of a pelvis injury last season. But that was sort of I expect that's sort of like a one-off thing that won't happen again. You'll see there very, very rarely misses a game. So very, very reliable member of the squad, right? And just the last point, yeah, he didn't have a good season last season, but there's a reason why managers like him, and we mustn't forget what he was doing in previous seasons, right? So, guys, that is the end. That is the end of the sort of breakdown of Mason Mount. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know these videos are quite a long breakdown. I do a lot of talking, and if you guys would prefer something a little bit shorter, let me know. I'm also on TikTok as well, Thread Manchester, so I'm hoping to release some content there today on TikTok as well. A bit of a shorter breakdown, like 5 reasons why Erik ten Hag wants Mason Mount, and just go over it in a couple of minutes. But if you guys enjoyed the video, please do like, please do subscribe if you're new. Let me know your thoughts on the video as well in the comments. And yes, guys, I hope to see you again on YouTube soon with sort of a goalkeeper analysis at some point. And I also hope to see you again on Twitter. I hope Twitter's not going to die because we've created a great community on there. I'm also going to put a link to my Discord community in the comments, in the description as well. So if you want to join the Discord community, we've got about 200 members on there where we can talk regularly about football. If you're worried that Twitter's not going to work or you can't get on Twitter, just go to the description in the YouTube on YouTube here, and you can access my Discord community. But thanks a lot for all the support, guys. I appreciate it as always. Any recommendations, any suggestions, as always, get in the comments, and I'll see you soon, guys. Cheers.